Good morning, Colorado. Today, part 2 of our series, Can Colorado Do More with Less Water?, where we look at what Coloradoans of all stripes are doing to address water scarcity. We heard from hundreds of our readers from all corners of the state, and we set out to find who is doing their share to save Colorado's precious water. This episode heads up to the mountains where a ski resort is conserving water, or more specifically snow, in hopes of getting some extra days on the slopes. I'm Sun Up host David Kraus. Before we jump into today's conversation, a quick message from our sponsor.
Colorado's water future demands bold action. At Palmer Land Conservancy, they're taking an action-oriented approach to tackle our biggest water challenges while protecting the Colorado good life. Now see what's at stake in Mirasol, Looking at the Sun, their award-winning documentary. Watch free at palmerland.org. This project was made possible by the generous support of Colorado Sun members who believe in funding independent news that serves all Coloradans. Join them in supporting our work with a donation today. Go to coloradosun.com/support.
Now, back to the show. Autumn is a time of anxiety for ski resorts, with fingers crossed for functional snow as early as possible to open the lifts on time. At Aspen Snowmass, a new innovation may firm up opening day at the terrain parks even if Mother Nature doesn't cooperate, while saving some water in the process. Antti Lauslahti is the CEO of SnowSecure, a Finnish company that sells a snow farming system that uses thick mats to save last year's snow for the new season.
One of the points that I have heard a lot in the Rockies and in Colorado in general is about the question about the water.
Snow is collected in big piles in the spring and covered by a network of insulated mats until it's ready to be rolled out at the terrain parks in the autumn.
When you make a snow pile and you cover the snow, in fact, there's no new water needed for the snow storage. So it's actually the snow that is already once produced, and then it's covered with our material.
Aspen One, the company that owns Buttermilk and Snowmass, estimates that these mats are protecting piles of snow so large that if they were melted, the water could cover 10 acres of land in 1 foot of water. It's also equivalent to about 3.5 million gallons of water. Based on results from other mountains, officials hope to retain about 80% of that snow by fall.
Everything was pretty efficient. Some measurements looking at it, we lost about 20% maximum. We were estimating about 25%, so we're happy with it. The snow quality was good. There's a firm layer on the top, but once you're through it, the snow inside was great.
Duncan Curry is the director of operations at Sun Peak Ski Resort in British Columbia. Last year, the resort covered a 17,000 cubic meter pile of snow, and they were happy with the results.
I'd say in the last 10 years, we've had to push our opening by maybe 1 or 2 days, but that's kind of been the worst case. And this year, with what was a fairly lean snow year and a lean year for snowmaking temperatures, in part thanks to that pile and our snowmaking team, we did open as scheduled on November 8th.
Curry says they've tripled the amount of snow they stored this spring, which could free up more of their snowmaking resources next season.
We only have about 28.5 million US gallons for snowmaking, so the fact that each pile takes up about 1.4 million gallons, in theory, we have, a net gain of water that we can start using other places earlier in the season, other parts of our race centre to get it open earlier. And then the knock-on effect is for our public opening, we'll have, more water available to open our runs.
For ski resorts, having controllable snow early in the season can be a major boost when trying to open terrain parks and ski runs for the busy holiday season. Here's Snow Secure CEO Antti Lasleti.
The snow farming is like a new tool in the toolbox of snow management. It's not like a magic silver bullet that changes everything, but at the same time, it can help exactly to secure those days and those season openings when typically a ski resort suffer.
You may be wondering, if ski resorts are holding on to some of their snow through the summer, will that impact the alpine environment? Rosemary Carroll is a research professor at the Desert Research Institute and a member of the Upper Gunnison River Water Conservancy District Board. She says maybe someday, if other resorts got on board, but not at this scale of the piles up at Snowmass and Buttermilk this season.
So Aspen, it looked like, was storing about 10 acre feet of water. So when you do the math, if you assume it's 10 acre feet of water over a year, just say they're pulling that out of the water budget per se, not completely because it could melt later, that's not a ton of water. If you draped buttermilk in a giant blanket, yeah, that would be problematic on many fronts. But this is relatively small from my calculation, not having done a scientific study or anything.
Carol says this experiment at Aspen Snowmass is worth trying, at least a little at a time.
Ski resorts are trying something new. It's worth trying. It's not overly impactful from my point of view, given the information I have right now. And, so that should be celebrated, but also be aware that scale matters.
Joining me now is the reporter who dug into this story for us, Betsy Welch. She is a journalist based in Carbondale in the Roaring Fork Valley. Betsy, thanks for joining us. The snow blankets, they seem like a simple idea. You've been up there to see them. How do they work? And give us a little bit of the science behind them if you can.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, these snow blankets have generated quite the buzz, much more so than I anticipated, which is kind of funny because they're so simple. Maybe, I guess, the material is not quite as simple, but they look like big white felt blankets. And that's kind of what they feel like too. I hiked up and touched them. But anyway, the concept is they're these insulated blankets or mats or tarps. They're kind of referred to all those things interchangeably. And the idea is they insulate huge piles of snow that get pushed into piles in the spring and insulate them so that they are still there in the fall.
It seems like something they've been doing for a long time in Europe, I guess. Aspen is among a growing number of North American resorts looking at it. It's starting to heat up in Colorado. Betsy, does it seem like these blankets are working? Give us a little bit more information on how that's going to play out in the next few months.
Yeah, you're right. They definitely have origins in Europe. The company that makes this particular mat is Finnish, from Finland, and they've had wild success over there. They have been storing snow at venues that host cross-country World Cup ski races, Alpine World Cup ski races, and they have held these events on all stored snow, which is pretty insane. Anyway, yes, so over here in the Roaring Fork Valley, like the rest of Colorado, we had a pretty grim winter and we're having a very hot summer. So, if you look at the slopes of Buttermilk Mountain where there is one of these piles, it's it's green. The slopes are green, but it's looking more like August than July. But there's this one big white thing, which, I was up there, 2 weeks ago, I think, on my bike, and I wanted to get up close and personal with this thing. And so I pedaled over and the big white blanket, you can kind of peek under it. And there, lo and behold, is this huge pile of snow. I think it's about, I don't know the measurements, but maybe the size of a basketball arena or something. And it's pretty hard packed. I guess it kind of, the snow settles as it's stored there. So it kind of compresses. It was like dripping a little bit, but that was just the part where the tarp was kind of open air. Most of the tarp comes down to the ground. There just was like one spot where I could peek my head under. It's a lot cooler under there, so that was kind of cool to like feel the temperature shift. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to think that pile is going to withstand the heat. Like it's so hot up here right now. I mean, it's in the 80s in Aspen, which is pretty rare, as you know. But they say, I mean, the people who've used the technology say that they only lose about 20% of the volume of this snow pile over a summer, even like a really hot summer. So we'll see.
Betsy, something that came up a lot in your conversations with these experts was the importance of timing concerning the availability of the snow for the ski resorts. I want to quickly play some sound you gathered from the Snow Secure CEO on a ski race in Finland.
Last year, for example, they had the ski race, FIS Alpine Race. They had it in mid-November. And without the snow farming, it would have been cancelled, the whole race. But now, with snow farming, first, they can have a 1 month training for all the national ski teams. And then they have a great race mid-November. So the point is that snow farming allows you to have a longer season. You don't use more water or you don't use more watershed. You just time, it's a timing matter.
For ski resorts, having snow ready when they want it is just as important as not having to make new snow. Betsy, can you expand on that a bit?
Yeah, so this is, in essence, it really is a timing issue, I guess. Storing snow becomes about timing when you can open certain parts of your mountain. So I mentioned like those Finnish World Cup races that are in November. Here in Colorado, people might be familiar with the Birds of Prey races over at Beaver Creek. You know, those are also really early season, and it's been increasingly hard to hold those races because it's been so warm that resorts can't make snow, and there hasn't been natural snow either. So the idea is that if you store snow, it's kind of an insurance policy. You're insuring that you have snow there for these particular timelines that you need, which is, okay, we have Birds of Prey at the end of November. For example, one of the resorts I spoke to up in British Columbia, they have a race center where teams from all over come and train, and they try and open in early November. Well, this pile of stored snow allowed them to do that. If they hadn't stored the snow, they would have been, I think he said, like 2 weeks later in opening. And then, of course, there's all the ripple effects from opening on time or opening early, which means that, you know, if you're in a ski town, then your restaurants are getting business and your hotels are filling up. And, you know, if you are a race training center, maybe you're going to get some more teams come because you're the only resort that's open at that time of year.
And for Aspen Snowmass, they're storing this snow at Buttermilk. Betsy, that's where every year for more than almost 25 years now, we've seen the X Games. I've been there on lean snow years and watched them try to farm this to make the half pipe, to make the big jumps. You know, those are carved in the mountain already, but certainly need a certain amount of snow. What's their goal with this farmed snow at Aspen Snowmass?
That's exactly it. It is to get a good, I guess, a jump start on their terrain park, which, yes, also includes the X Games venue. That's where the pile is. It's sort of right on the slope above where that huge half pipe is that they build every year. There's also a pile at Snowmass Mountain, and same thing. That's also for the terrain park over there. So Aspen's really treating this as a pilot program this year. They didn't go crazy in like storing a bunch of snow, but I think, you know, these are two like really good use case examples. This is also too like the buttermilk pile. It's at a lower elevation where it's warmer, it's harder to make snow. So this should alleviate some of that pressure.
Timing also came up on the environmental side. I want to play some more sound from Professor Rosemary Carroll, someone you talked to on some of the theoretical advantages here.
So beginning on November 1st, so they actually start on Halloween night at midnight, they start pumping from the East River, which is our water source in Mount Crested Butte and the Crested Butte ski area. And that can be a time when the water is really low. So you could be helping if they pumped less or didn't have an opportunity to pump. They could be helping that late season flow.
Saving snow for the fall means you may not have to make as much snow when the conditions aren't right. What did you learn, Betsy?
Well, I think one of the big questions that, we had that some of our readers have had is like, should we be concerned about this in terms of water? Like, if you store snow, are you holding on to water that should be going back into the creeks and rivers? And, that's why we spoke with a hydrologist and professor to try and figure that out. In my mind, snowmaking is incredibly resource intensive. It uses a ton of water. It's also can be, a fool's errand in these warm temperatures where you may only have half an hour to an hour where the temperature gets low enough to make the snow. But anyway, that said, Rosemary, kind of confirmed that storing snow isn't really holding on to water. First of all, these piles aren't a significant amount of water. There's not a significant amount of water in that pile if you think about an entire ski resort, which in the case of Aspen Snowmass is 4 mountains. So, were they storing snow all over 100 times what they're doing, then maybe there would be some concern about water not returning to the watershed. But it seems like it's way less water intensive than snowmaking. The other thing, too, that she mentioned is that, there's something called sublimation, which is where snow, when it melts, it just becomes vapor, not water. And that happens with quite a high percentage of snow melt in the spring. So it's not like all the snow you see on a ski resort in the spring is going back to water. A certain amount of it does not go back to water. And so with this small pile of snow, first of all, it's small, and then you've got sublimation. And I think the other way to think about it is you're kind of recycling in a way. So yes, maybe that first year that you store the snow, yes, you're holding back that water. But then year after year, you're not. It's like a net zero.
I think it's interesting. There was a resort survey done a few years ago in Colorado, found snowmaking diverts about 1.5 billion gallons of water in the state every year. They usually see about 80% of that water used in snowmaking returns to the watershed when the snow melts in the spring. Betsy, talk about the big picture. Is this about water conservation, the resort's bottom line, or a little bit of both?
The more pessimistic part of me, I guess, would just say this is about the resort's bottom line. But, resorts increasingly are concerned with water conservation. So I guess that wouldn't be fair to say that this isn't top of their minds, too. I do think that ultimately they want to be able to open when they say they're going to open. If they say come at Thanksgiving, they need to have something for people to ski at Thanksgiving. However, how cool would it be if this thing that is, benefiting them in that way is also a water conservation strategy, especially when weighed against just, again, how resource intensive snowmaking is and how increasingly unreliable it is. So I think, sure, it's a bit of both. I do think we are going to see more and more of it. Yes, Aspen was first in Colorado this year, but the founder of the company who makes the blankets said that he's talked to, I think, 80 resorts in North America, 50 of those in the US. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see at least, 20 who are doing this next year. Because if it really does do what our friends up in BC say it does, which is allow you to open on time, which on time could mean weeks before other resorts, that's very impactful for a ski area.
And I think part of that, Aspen mountain, they added snowmaking at the top of the mountain to be able to secure that Thanksgiving opening a few years ago, right? They put in with the Forest Service. They didn't have snowmaking all the way to the top. So that snowmaking has allowed them to almost guarantee that Thanksgiving week opening, which is always huge, especially in Aspen. From your reporting, I kind of mentioned Aspen One hopes to keep about 80% of that 3.5 million gallons of water under these blankets. We're talking about 1.2 billion gallons of water overall in the whole industry in Colorado. Drop in the bucket? Is that how we're going to look at this?
Yes. Yeah, I guess like as Rosemary, the hydrologist, said, maybe we revisit the conversation when we start to see A, more resorts doing this, and B, more resorts doing more of it. Sun Peaks, the resort in BC, they went from storing 1 pile last year to now they're up to 3. I mean, I do think it's a sort of a self-limiting practice. I don't think you're going to see these blankets all over the mountains. Although, you know, in those Finnish race venues, you have to store quite a bit of snow to put on a downhill race. So we'll see. I don't think it's any cause for concern yet. Again, it's better than snowmaking. And you mentioning them putting snow guns up higher on Aspen Mountain, if they're not trying to make snow down low, where it's a fool's errand because they're storing it, they're not dipping into that water that they would have used down there. So maybe these things used together are a good option for now.
Betsy, one of the things I think for me, especially as a journalist, and I'm sure for you, reporting and going to new places, talking to new people, learning new things, it's always so refreshing. What's one of the big things that stood out to you as you worked through this assignment?
I guess 2 things. One, a lot of people here in the valley don't know what this thing is. They've driven by it and seen it, and when I've told them that I wrote a story about this pile of snow, they're like, "Oh, that's what it is." Another thing that surprised me is it's, and I probably shouldn't say this because I hope they don't build a fence around it, but it's quite it's just there. There's no signage. There's no keep out. I mean, like I said, I was kind of under the blanket poking around. And over at Sun Peaks in BC, their ops guy, he said there's been so much interest that they're going to put some signage around their piles, like some sort of interpretive signage, which I thought is really cool. You know, these things aren't hiding. You can see them. And then, yeah, I think the other thing that has surprised me is just the interest in the story. You know, we've had readers respond to it, some local public radio stations. And it's funny because in Finland, it's like old news. You know, they've been doing this for a few decades and it's so new here and so novel that I think people are really curious about it.
Betsy Welch, really appreciate the time and the insight on your reporting on this project. If you haven't already and you want to read Betsy's full story on the snow blankets of the Roaring Fork Valley, you can find it and our entire series on water at coloradosun.com/water solutions series. And as always, on our free Colorado Sun app. While you're there, you can leave us questions of your own about water in Colorado, and you can get the Colorado Sun delivered to your inbox every day with our Sunriser newsletter. Betsy, thanks again for jumping on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
As an award-winning nonprofit news outlet, we take our mission of credible, independent journalism seriously. You can check out our trust indicators at coloradosun.com/ethics. This episode was produced by the Colorado Sun with the services by Pirate Audio and Ed Words, LLC. Our music is by the Denver musician Name Backwards and Zones. A link to their music is in our show notes. And a special thanks to Swallow Hill Music. I'm David Kraus. See you next time.